And we are back. So if you just happen to be listening to this on release day, that means that you just finished listening to episode one. You know why we love comics the way we do. But I wanted to talk about like just what exactly we love about comics, or not even so much what we love about comics, but what are the criteria that we have? What makes a comic good? So if case you are listening to this for the first time, I'm BJ Kicks, and this is the Comics Are Dope podcast, and I'm joined by my homie and guest host for the day, my man Skip. How you doing, bro?
Man, blessed, man. Blessed to be here. It was a good new comic book day this week. And we're going to talk about what qualifies a good comic book to us. So I think it's a timely discussion. Let's get it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, let me just ask you right off the bat, because no matter what conversation I'm having about comics, I tend to take the approach that I'm a newcomer. Right? I started reading comics in 2019. We're coming up on the 4-year anniversary. But how long have you been reading comics?
Reading comics, if we count the break in between when I was younger and then got back into it about 10 years ago, yeah, about 20, a little over 20 years total of reading comics.
Okay. But you would call yourself like an avid fan for the last 10 years.
Absolutely, yes, I would.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, again, I'm the newcomer. I'm the little bro in this situation. But I started reading comics, like I said, in 2019. And as far as like what you gravitate toward, what are there genres that you gravitate toward, or how do you go about it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and there are genres that I gravitate towards, but more so creators
Mm-hmm.
and things that I can relate to. That's what I tend to gravitate towards the most.
Mm-hmm.
The third on that list would be unconventional. If something is unconventional, if it's not run of the mill, and I don't mean to say that in a condescending way, because we all know I'll grab a run of the mill real quick if it appeals to me. But
Mm-hmm.
if it's one of those three things, you'll usually find me gravitate towards it. Yeah.
Word. I find that it's hard for me to sort of quantify my comic taste, but um, first of all, I love superheroes, right?
hmm
So I'm almost, I'd say I'm like 95% capes in my comics. Even the indies that I read are typically based on some sort of action franchise like Power Rangers or Ninja Turtles. So it's almost all superhero stuff on my plate generally.
hmm
Um, but for me, I love a good action book. But I also just love a good, solid story. Like I always say, like just give me some heart, right? Like I love family stories. Um,
Yes.
I love a good story with young leads.
hmm
Um, I especially love like father son, father daughter dynamics.
Big time.
Um, and yeah, that's kind of that's my bag, right? So if Superman and John Kent are both on the cover, I'll probably grab it. If it's Batman and Damian Wayne, I'm probably grabbing it, right? Like because
Right.
they mix the two. It's the superheroes and it's family. You can't go wrong. Um, but even the indies that I enjoy most have that aspect in some way as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel you on that. One of the things, and I gotta say, one of
Mhm.
my missions throughout, us going through this process when I do join you on these is to get you to drop that I'm a newcomer tag, because you about to hit year 4, man. Like,
Or
you ain't new no more. You be teaching me stuff, man. Like, you ain't new no more. But I get the vibes, and let's all be honest. BJ Kicks is a very humble man, so we gotta give him that, right?
ah man, I mean, look, comics have been around since what? Forever ago, right?
Yup.
Batman's like 80 years old. I've
hmm
been reading Batman for 4 years, and for the most part, the stuff that I've read is almost all like current, as in
hmm
2019 on. I'll go back and read some classic stories here and there, trying to get caught up, especially if it's Batman or X-Men. But listen, I'm almost always in the newcomer in the learning seat, the student seat, if you will. So it works
I
for me.
I got you. I got you. And I think that's one of the things. Like that's something that I can note between me coming back and you coming back.
Hmm.
I have heard you say to a degree that when you came in, you like you just mentioned, you did go back and you were trying to look for some of the classic stories, that people were talking about. For myself, I that's kind of what I jumped into first. I didn't really rush to get current. I read some current titles, but I
Hmm.
did go back and I did a lot of older reading first.
Hmm.
So I caught up on like major DC events, major Marvel events because I knew a lot of the status quo changes were going to be in those. So in a
Yeah.
way, if we're kind of looking at it from like a bird's eye view, that's the meta. So I caught up with the meta
Hmm.
relatively quickly, and then from there I jumped around and would ask like, okay, how was this run? How was that run? This character, that character. So I think that's probably one of the things. But really, when you're if you consume a lot of the same things, your
Hmm.
taste buds don't get as much of a chance to grow and stretch to see, what you do really like and what you don't really like. You definitely know what you do like, and you know a little bit of what you don't like. But
Right.
the more that you start stepping outside of, your comfort zone, not, you still got to keep some of that because that's the stuff that keeps you going, right? But
Hmm.
as you get outside of that and you do start to read some of the uh, 3 kids or 4 kids walk into a bank, one of
Right.
the things that you were talking about, kids, and that we read together, then
Right.
that's when you start to expand your taste buds, and you can really, I believe that's where you really find the you books, not
Hmm.
like the, oh, this genre or this creator or capes or crime noir, but the what speaks to me. And then, of course, like you mentioned, you start to get the, oh yeah, if it's got kid leads, if there's a family thing, father
Hmm.
daughter, what I'm saying, son daughter. So I do a lot of that, man. That's really like my thing, kind of letting go a little bit. Like, all right, I kind of get how most stories are going to go with these characters, and
Right.
I've had enough of the characters that I really enjoy get turned into a different direction that I didn't really want to go. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be a little less on the character focus side. What is the lifeblood? What keeps me going? The creator, the person with the ideas. They got the ideas, they make the ideas work. The artist, visually brings it to be. And that's kind of where I've been sitting pretty comfortably for about the last 4 years. It's just following creators, trying things, and I'm a big proponent of actually trying things that I consistently don't like that other
Hmm.
people do like Tom King. You hear
Hmm.
me talk about Tom King, but I still buy a lot of Tom King. I bought Gotham Year One, Issue One and Issue Two. Just
Hmm.
because if other people, if people like you or maybe Bunkmaster B, if you guys are finding some quality there, maybe there's something I'm missing, and I always want to give the creators the benefit of the doubt.
Word. Word. And yeah, like I always say, like I haven't, or I feel like I haven't been reading comics long enough to like write off a certain creator, right? Like, I try not to make these episodes sound too timely, but right now I'm like really struggling with John Ridley, right? Like
Yeah.
he's got I Am Batman, which just wrapped up. His Black Panther run will wrap up in like a couple of weeks as we're filming this, and yeah, man, I'm just like, all right, he's not doing it for me. But he also is writing a book called GCPD The Blue Wall.
Hmm.
And it's like legit one of my favorite books on shelves right now, even though I'm not buying it. Like I'm purposefully waiting for it to hit the unlimited services. But every time I read it, I'm like, yo, this is the best thing I read this week. So it's interesting, right? Like a certain creator might not be great for a certain genre or a certain character,
Right.
but they have their strengths. Like the editors hired them for a reason, clearly.
Yes. Hmm.
Um, and so it's good, to kind of jump out of your comfort zone, like you said. Um, so let me ask you this: what what qualifies as a good comic for you? Like how are you rating comics?
This is a really good question. And it kind of leads for those of you who are over at Comics Are Dope, where this
Mhm.
podcast is, being published and whatnot. And if you're reading the articles, expect an article coming soon that's a little more data driven on quality of paper, story, et cetera, et cetera. To give you a preview of that, a good comic, I try to look at things like this in more of an objective way. So
Mhm.
what I would say is let's get ourselves a good cover that really pops.
Hmm.
Let's get ourselves, some visual storytelling where we got good anatomy, we got good camera movement, we've got good establishing shots and sequential art,
Hmm.
and maybe even a little flair. And I like some personality too from artists. You know what I mean? Like, don't just, if you could just tell the story, that's satisfactory. But if you can reveal to me a little bit of who you are through your art,
Hmm.
I really start to get, I start to key in on your idiosyncratic, nature and identification. Of course, a story, if we can get a good plot, if I can feel progress at the end of it, usually some sort of resolution. If the characters can have their own voices, so it's very easy for me to distinguish and even hear their voices in the head as I read the dialogue, and kind of balance those things out. If and also, I do take into thought the quality of the paper. Is the ink on the cover running off on my hands
Hmm.
when I'm turning the pages? How do they feel? I would say that's kind of a general idea of objectively what I might classify as a good comic. But I would, let's share what your requirements would be in that scenario.
Word. Yeah. I certainly note good quality, like just because, we don't get it all that often. Right.
Hmm.
So it stands out. Like, what I was thumbing through, I just got in like an old stack of Darkwing Duck trades,
Hmm.
and I was thumbing through those, and I was like astounded at like just how good the paper was on these trade paperbacks. And it was like
Yeah.
real thick and glossy. I was like, oh, that's dope. Um, but even like this past week, right? Blue Book #1 came out from James Tynan, and that had a really good paper feel. Um, but I don't. It's not something that I'm like looking at like, okay, well, if this paper didn't feel good, that's a knock against your comic book, right? For me,
Hmm.
it's real abstract, honestly. Not a whole
Okay.
lot of objectivity going on. It's
Okay.
did you so all right. So I'm a most of what I read is like a good action based story, right? So
Hmm.
like I want to like read this comic book and escape for a good 7-10 minutes, however long it's gonna take, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, did you take me on a ride in this comic? And sometimes the art will fully carry that experience. Other times it's the pacing and the story itself just kind of takes you on a trail. Like the Reckless books, for example, right?
Right.
The art is good, but the art is really just like in service to the story to me,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
And so
Okay.
like if I'm reading a Reckless book, I'm so in it for the mystery and okay, well, he thought this turn was going to lead here and it led there, blah, 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 right?
Right.
So take me on a ride. It might be, just a solid mystery and solid action thriller or just thriller in general. Or it might be something like Far Sector where I didn't really care much for the story, but Jamal Campbell's art was just so great to look at. Like I'm just like, yo, this is awesome. So there's that. And then there's just like how do I feel at the end of this book, right? Like, and sometimes it's like a super poignant topic. Sometimes, like I said, it's a nice fun ride. It kind of feels like going on a roller coaster. You get off, you got your adrenaline, um, and then there's also just the sort of a lasting impact, right? One of my favorite issues of really any comic, right, has been House of X #4. When I first was getting into comics, spoilers if you haven't read it, basically all the X-Men die on a mission in that issue. And I was just like, yo, what just happened? Like, what? And that's where the issue ends. And it's like that feeling, the feeling I got when I read that issue, I feel like I chase that every time I pick up a comic book. But yeah, like I don't have like a ton of like objective notes. Like I think you could like we can all tell where like the dialogue is a little clunky, or something felt rushed, or there was just a real convenient happening, right? Like there's all those things. Like for me, it's like if it takes me out of the story, then it counts against you. But if the story is that good or the art is that good that I can, sort of ignore those things, then, great job. You got extra credit. And so you ended up with 100 anyway. I graded on a curve.
I hear you, and I respect that. I
Mm,
respect it, and I get it. I think, and to be honest, I that's how I kind of used to view it. I
hmm
think it's a little bit of okay. So once you get to the point where you read so many of those things,
hmm
and I think you're conscious of it. As I
hmm
watch your videos, I start to hear you say things.
hmm
Usually they're really quick. You make
uh,
little comments, little quips, and I'm like, ah, his sensitivity rises.
right.
But you become more sensitive to those things because you've taken so much of it in.
Yeah.
You start to get a filter. So like, okay, I read so many action cape stories. I like
hmm
action, and I
hmm
don't dislike capes. I play like I don't because it makes conversation more interesting. You know, you
Right.
poke the bear a little bit, but I like capes. I probably got more capes books than any other type of book in my library.
Right.
But after so many, I read so many that eventually some of them start to kind of be the same. And I start to decipher, okay, like, well, this one's a little, did a little bit better of a job of getting me. This one did a little worse. And then eventually I get to the point where I'm like, well, look, if I'm going to spend my time reading more of what I've already read so much of, I want it to be more of the cream of the crop because
Right.
my time is limited and I only have so much time. I got kids too, and
hmm
and full-time job and all these other hobbies, music and writing and da, 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 da. So if I'm going to spend my precious time, which there is no receipt for, we cannot do a refund on time. I
Right.
really want to be reading the cream of the crop. I don't really I have a some space for, oh yeah, that was a good story. Like,
hmm
I was reading Exterminators, I mean, like that
hmm
X-Men book. That was the only one that like appealed to me in such a long time because it was so different. It was like old 80s B movies, which I used to love 80s B movies, when I was a kid. So it kind of hit a little nostalgic thing and the execution was good enough. But once you intake enough and then so much of it and your time is more limited, that's when I'm like, I really want to be reading the best. This book needs to really speak to me if I'm going to be a little less objective, or if I'm going to be objective and I am going to read a Batman Chip Zdarsky and a Detective Comics by Rom V, I'm really going to be judging these series. Like, how good is this Batman run? I've read a lot. How good is this detectives run? I read a lot. I read a lot. And then what are you putting into it? Are you putting a little extra of your personality? And I love when authors speak through their stories.
Right.
Don't just dictate to me, but like tell me a story and then show me your heart. Like where's your heart? Where's your mind? Show me those things. So some people do that more than others. You'll see some creators just clock in and they're like, this is a script to knock out. I got rent to pay. Not every creator sits down and tries to write the best Batman or Superman or their best work. Like I know creators. Sometimes they just got to get scripts in on time to the editor. That's their friend because their editor got to get a book out to print on time. And I know we don't like to fantasize about that as comic book fans who spend our hard earned money, but it's a reality. So
hmm
when I can read and I can tell that that's far from the case, that's when something starts to elevate in my eyes and my filters are saying, yes, Curtis, this is why we filter books, because this is the quality that we want to read.
Word. Word. Yeah. No, there's definitely some truth to that. Like just the fact that any book that you read, uh, you know, just by virtue of how it works, right? You're comparing it to everything you've ever read before, right? And so the more you
Hoxpox
read,
issue 4. What
yeah,
if wouldn't it be great if every comic could be Hoxpox issue number 4?
right,
Or
right,
Hox issue number 4.
right, Hawks for right. If everything was that, like, dog, like it, anyway. Um, but and I think so much of it is kind of the monthly or weekly comics experience as well, right?
Mm,
Like you read books every week, and there are books that issue to issue I would rate 7, maybe even 8 out of 10,
mhm.
right? And then the full story is over, and I'm like, yep, that's a 5. Like, and maybe
Right.
they just didn't stick the landing or
Yeah.
whatever it was, but
Mhm.
it's like there's something about that weekly cycle of reading that kind of lulls you into a state, right? And this may be a whole different conversation, but reading comics from week to week, even my rating system, we talked about it like on a live stream recently, right? But
Hmm.
even my rating system, when I give like my quick takes, it's compared to everything else that was on my desk that week, right?
Right.
So a 9 out of 10 is what I dub my favorite book of the week, right? And so, on a light week, you might have a superstar book that really isn't all that, with good competition. It's like, playing at the YMCA when you got, Division 1 talent,
Hmm.
right? But yeah, that's kind of the nature of the beast. So with that in mind, what is it that makes you pick up a comic book?
Excuse me. It could be a number of things. I still leave space for the wonder of that cover that catches your eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, don't get me wrong, I'm a little bit of a collector, so I'll still buy comics just for covers and stuff like that. But more often than anything these days, it's going to be either the premise, because if I see a book, I'll pick it up and I'll flip through it, or I'll look up what the solicit was and I'll check out the premise. It will be the creative team, and I'm really big on creative teams.
Mm-hmm.
For consistency's sake, when I find creators that really speak to me and I feel like respect my time and my money that I invest in them, I stick with them. Almost
Mm-hmm.
like if there's a masseuse, you go get massages, after working out, and there's a masseuse that like knows the spots and gets you good and limber and relaxed. You're like, okay, I always want to request that person. That's how I feel about creators too. They always do right by me. And I used I've kind of let go of my allegiance of publishers,
Mm-hmm.
because eventually all of them have have done me wrong or dropped the ball, and I had
Word.
to be like, okay, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So
Right.
yeah, it's mostly going to be creative teams, premise, or if it's got a good cover, I'll at least pick it up and flip through it. But what about you?
I mean, yeah, initially it's definitely character, right? Like
Okay.
I'll buy almost any Batman book, right? But Batman's probably not a good example because there are so many Batman books to choose from. There are several that I leave on the shelf, right? Because
Hmm.
let's say it's a Batman Black Label book. I got to be really interested in the creative team to buy that, month to month. When I know it's going to get collected, it'll be a hardcover later, and so on. And also, again, Batman's like 80% of DC's output right now. I don't need
Yeah.
that much Batman in my system.
Right.
Um, but other than that, right, I'm often trying new stories or trying new runs, right? And Marvel and DC don't put out any shortage of #1 titles. There's always something to try. Um,
Always.
so I'll give it a shot, and I end up shooting myself in the foot because I want to give it at least 2-3 issues to hook me. But then let's say it's a 5-6 issue miniseries. Well, now I just got to buy the rest of it because what am I going to do with the rest? What am I going to do with these three? Right? I'm not going to sell them because who wants just 3 issues out of the 6? So yeah, I get trapped a lot. But what really intrigues me, like you said, a good cover, an interesting premise. If it's a creator that I just like a lot, right? Like Chip Zdarsky's kind of earned that with me.
Okay.
Tom Taylor had earned
Hmm.
a lot of goodwill with me.
Hmm.
Jonathan Hickman, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a few names that if I see those writers or certain artists on a book, like I'm definitely grabbing it. If Jamal Campbell is doing interior artwork, because he doesn't do it often, I'm
Right.
grabbing that book. Um, Same for Jorge Jimenez. Um, and there are a few others, but yeah, those are the top of the list for me, at just from top of mind.
Mhm.
But yeah, so creative team gets it. Um, Publisher, I'm not so much, right? I think I'm a more of a DC fan than Marvel. But that's just because I grew up on X-Men, and so the Marvels just got X-Men in their own corner of the universe, and so there's no need to read other Marvel usually.
True.
Um, but Spider-Man like kind of sucks right now, So I try to give different books a chance, different characters from my childhood or whatever, but it's not always hitting.
No, unfortunately not. Yeah, yeah, that's kind of the give and take of it.
Hmm.
You do have to accept a bit of the okay, I'm going to try this and it might not work.
Right.
That just comes with it. We take a gamble of it, and at this point, I charge it to the game.
Word.
Because over time, same thing. Like I take a lot of chances now. I'm like, okay, let's see about this book. Heavy Metal Drummer. What's that? The Many Deaths of Layla Starr. Okay. But the more you take chances and you get your hits and the misses, same thing. Like your taste buds just grow more and more keen. And I can
Hmm.
honestly say these days it's very rare that I try a book that I don't end up enjoying, and wanting to continue because at this point, reading this in depth for this long, over the last at this point 11 years, I'm just really good at finding books that I like. And another part of it is the community
Hmm.
out there at large, especially really good community, the community that you've built, with your channel and whatnot. You get good people in there, and you got all these recommendations flying around and flinging around. And one of my favorite things, because I'm a big stickler for this, although like the books that I say are good, I do believe are good. And
Hmm.
even if it's not, a book that matches this type of person or that type of person, if you read enough comics, you can probably say, okay, I did read that Homesick Pilots book, or I did read that Ice Cream Man, and it is effective at making me feel something. Maybe I didn't
Hmm.
like what it made me feel, maybe I loved it, but that's a sign of an effective creator if they can really get you to feel that. But I'm a big stickler for recommending books to people that fit what they want.
Hmm.
I honestly, Kicks, I don't end up recommending a lot of my books to people
Right.
because I know a lot of people aren't into the type of books that I'm into.
Yeah.
And I can't allow that to make me change my list of books. Like I have to remain who I am. And
Hmm.
I try to buy, stuff outside of my comfort zone to try to connect myself to the overall comics community. But recommending books to people based off of what they like is big to me because that's how you're going to be more effective. Someone says, "Hey, what should I be reading next?" My next answer is in the form of question. What did you previously read? What kind of stories do you like? What creators do you like? And then I take that information and I try to get them something that fits them despite my own preferences.
Right.
How do
So
you approach things like that? I mean, that's obviously a part of what's, a little bit of what you feel like is good or bad. How do you evaluate what might be a good book for another person?
it's difficult, right? Because I don't try to put myself in other people's shoes very often, right?
Okay.
At least in
Okay.
that way.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll tell you what I liked about whatever book I liked specifically. Um, and if you like what I like, then you'll like that. It's only been recently that I'll try a book that someone recommends. And I'm okay, I can see what you enjoyed about it, right? I think the example that comes to mind is Ice Cream Man, right? Like
Mhm.
you love Ice Cream Man.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, all right, let me check this out. If anybody knows anything about me, well, you'll learn it right now. I don't do horror, right? I don't do horror movies. I don't do horror based TV shows. And I generally don't do horror comics. I can tolerate horror comics a little bit more because there's not like jump scares and like all the theatrics that you'll get in like a TV show that's legit just meant to scare you. Horror comics, though, can be unnerving, but at least those that I've read are not just like downright like creepy, scary, like taking you into weird territory emotionally. But Ice Cream Man is one of those books that has horrific elements, um, and in like this, but each issue has something to say about the human condition in a very interesting way. I checked it out on Skip's recommendation and I just read it digitally. I think I read
Mhm.
like the first 7 issues. And one thing I will tell you is that it's not a book to binge read, but depending on what else is on your pull list, it might be your favorite book every month that it comes out. And every issue that I've read is good. Right. And so I recommend certain books for people that like, hey, like, you know what, if you're not reading a bunch of other stuff, this will be good, right? Like I liked the Radiant Black universe when they started expanding the massive verse into like a million other titles. I'm like, all right, you know what? This is still good. There's nothing bad about this. I'm dropping it though, because I already live in a superhero universe in Marvel and DC, and that's enough to keep up with as it is, right? But for someone who doesn't, you know, have this allegiance to those characters, then this is a great alternative. So, yeah, because I'm, I wouldn't say biased, because I'm limited. I got my comic library is not broad. It's vast, but it's not broad, right? And so I'm like, listen, dog, like what you're gonna get from me is capes. Now I can tell you which superhero you might like more. If you're more of a sci-fi fan, you'll probably like Green Lantern. If you like space and cosmic stories, cool, Fantastic Four, or also Green Lantern, right? If you're like me and it's street level heroes, you know, Batman to a certain extent, even though he'll end up in space somehow too, right? But the
Or
Punisher,
falling from the moon.
right, skydiving from the moon. But you know, Deathstroke, like, so I can tell you a lot about a very specific set of comics. And then of course I just wax poetic about Milestone because that's just, it's a different spot for me. But yeah, I don't feel a need to be a librarian, right? Like I don't need to know, you know, much about everything. I'll dip my toe in and say, okay, did I like this? Did I not? Do I want to explore this more? But I don't need to like know the Dewey Decimal System, be able to point out, you know, where that is on in the book, in the building for you, you know?
My guy referenced the Dewey Decimal System right now. That's a throwback. I thought I was the only person that still ever talked about the Dewey Decimal System.
Does
I
it
have
not
to
exist anymore?
No, it's still there.
Oh,
But it's just like, I don't know, libraries as a whole, unfortunately, I just don't feel like enough people take advantage of. But that's
word.
like the analogy I use if I have to tell somebody like, hey, this is how an operating system directory works. It's like a
Right.
Dewey Decimal System. Um, you know, I totally get that, and it's something that I respect because although it is not how I approach comics, I do want to. I'm so curious. I'm a very curious person, and I like exotic things. You know, I like things that are provocative. So I want to try the different things. Like my pattern recognition is very high, and I'm a writer. So like, you know, like after I get your pattern down, I was like, your pattern better be very, very satisfying. Otherwise, I'm going to go look for some other different patterns. So
Word.
that's why I go around. But truth be told, sometimes I do wish I was a little easier to please. You know, when it comes to comics, or you know, sometimes I see people enjoying a series, and I'm like, man, sometimes I wish that I wasn't so critical, you know, of certain things. I would, and I know how to turn my criticism off a little bit, but like you said, if something truly takes me all the way out of the book, it's really hard for me to get back into it. But now, I think for a very important question, we've talked about what we like and what's constitutes a good comic.
Right.
We know our ceiling. We got to know our floor too.
Right.
What constitutes a bad comic for BJ Kicks?
Listen, man. So, I mean, of course, first and foremost,
Bad art, terrible art,
exactly.
non-Jim Lee art.
it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be Jim Lee.
I'm
right?
teasing.
But
Ignore me.
but yeah, nah. It's definitely terrible art. Like if your anatomy's off, specifically faces, like bad faces bother me. Like I mean, art is subjective. We can argue the merits of art whenever, but there's just certain things that are like, maybe your style isn't for me. But there are definitely like notable exceptions, right? Like a Daniel Warren Johnson, for example. If I had just seen his stuff on a shelf, like picked up the book, wouldn't have grabbed it most likely. Then you read a book and it's like, wow, this art services the story so well. And all of a sudden I appreciate it all the more.
Right.
Right. So I try to branch out when it comes to art. But I mean, if I'm looking at a superhero comic, then now I'm judging it by all the best superhero comics I've read. I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot better art tolerance for indies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now, as far like stuff that's going to take me out of a story, uh, if I'm confused, right?
Okay.
And I don't necessarily need to be spoon fed the story,
Mm-hmm.
but a part of why I read comics as opposed to watching TV or binging Netflix or whatever is I don't have 45 minutes to watch this and then 45 minutes to watch episode 2. Like, let me get this quick little dopamine hit. I enjoyed this book. All right, now I got to go back to real life, raising kids and stuff. So, if I'm reading your book and I just don't understand what's happening. And uh and there's a few exceptions, right? Like Priest is good for this.
Yes.
Priest is not someone necessarily to read
He does
month
not
to
hold your
month.
hand. No.
Right.
He will bewilder you.
Right. So you'll be like, I'm reading Black Adam right now. Black Adam through 6 issues, great. Issue 7, I'm like, what is happening? Like, is this the same book? And I know because I've read enough Priest
Yeah.
that by the time this series wraps with issue 12, it'll all come full circle. I'll understand it all, and it'll be amazing. It might be the best thing I read all year.
Mm-hmm.
But issue 7, I couldn't tell you what happened, and I probably won't be able to tell you until issue 9. Like, and that's just so there are, as you start to recognize different writers and styles, you can develop a tolerance for certain things and just, okay, I'll stick with it because I know. Like Hickman is another one, right?
Yeah.
Hickman's going to give you these broad and vast data pages, and he's gonna tell you story, and he's gonna show you story, and he's gonna leave things out purposefully and bring it back, and he'll like randomly have the artist recreate the same page panel for panel 5 issues later or 50 issues later, and all of a sudden it means something different. Like, all of that is going to happen, and you just have to roll with it, right? So there are certain like Grant Morrison, like I would tell new readers to stay away, but then like
I love Grant. I love kooky, crazy Grant Morrison. I love
right. Like, I would tell newcomers to stay away, but at the same time, the first Batman run I read was Grant Morrison, right? Like, I started with the Morrison Batman Volume 1, which ends with R.I.P.
Yeah.
But also has the Black Glove and some other like really confusing, like, who are these people? What is happening? All right, so technical difficulties, but we're back. But yeah, I think I was just, so we're talking about, what constitutes a bad story. Yeah, for me, if I'm confused, if I don't know what's going on, especially in a single issue, I have more patience if this is a collected edition, because I know the story is going to end, and I just got to get to the ending, and then I can judge for whether or not I liked it. But issue to issue, yeah, if I'm confused, that's gonna be a real rough day for me. But also, we're in an age where, the stories are, I hate the term political, but the same talking points that we get, on the news or just in day-to-day conversation, living amongst, a diverse group of people, those conversations are making their way into comics. And, some writers tend to use the books as like, a soapbox. And I think we all do. I think the difference is, right, like, how well do you hide the magic trick? Like, how good is the illusion, right? So I feel like, yeah, your main character can feel just like you feel, and they can tell me that without telling me that in a wall of text, right? Like, one of my favorite hood movies or hood classics is You Got Served, right? And whenever I see like just a line of dialogue that is, okay, this is clearly just to like teach a lesson to whoever, right? I'll go, well, this feud is stupid, selfish, and it affects a lot of people. Because
it's a throwback.
Right. Because that line did not need to be in the movie like that. Like, yes, we know that because we're watching the movie too. And so yeah, so stuff like that. It's because it's like, even if I agree with you, and in most cases I
Right.
do, like,
Hmm.
even if I agree with you, like, I don't, the book never needs to be a textbook,
Right.
right? Like I think you've got to like trust that your audience is sophisticated enough to understand your point without spoon
Yes.
feeding it to
Thank
them.
you. You that was the point that I was going to bring up. That
Yeah.
like cuz same with me, like I'm not of the mind that you should have no politics in comics. And
Hmm.
I'm also not of the mind that comics should be full of them. And hey, and if I find a book in it and I also don't just look to read like what I agree with. I challenge myself. I read things that I don't agree with and that I don't understand to see
Hmm.
if I can gain a better understanding of it, even if I'm not going to agree with it in the end.
Right.
But you know, it does give you a little insight into the writer's mind based off of how they present it. And if they are just talking down to you and XYZ, then I'm wondering, hey, are you preaching to the choir with your eyes closed, or
Hmm.
do you have your eyes wide open but you're preaching down to your readers? Like, do you not feel that your readers are sophisticated enough, or do you think that they can't take the data that you present and make up their own minds about it? So that does say something about the writer, or writers themselves, that do that. But overall, you can put something that I politically, morally, or whatever completely don't agree with, as long as it's not too gratuitous. I
Hmm.
like I can, and you just get your point across well, and the story does not suffer for what your message is. I can still read it, and I can probably even still enjoy it. But like, we are telling stories here, so let's keep the storytelling top notch, and
Right.
whatever morals or whatever message that you have in there, like I said, I want to know who you are. Put that in there.
Right.
And if you can slip it in there and have it be a value add, then man, you are really hitting the mark. You're on fire that day.
Right. Right. It's like one of my favorite writers is the late Dwayne McDuffie, right? And
Yes.
um my favorite work of his is Icon, from the OG
Okay.
Milestone run, right? And what that book does very well is presenting two characters that are pretty much the opposite in every way. One's young, one's old, one's conservative, one is liberal, although I don't think they would have used those terms, right? But it does such a great job of like presenting their arguments with each other without feeling like it's beating up on one character or the other. Right.
Yeah.
Like, there are moments where you agree with Icon. There are moments where you agree with Rocket. Um, and there are moments where you might not agree with either. And it's like the book sort of leaves you to think for yourself. There is certainly a character that, like, you're more sympathetic toward overall, but it's not presented in a way where it's like, hey, here's the Republican. He's wrong, and he's
Hmm.
clearly wrong, and everything he says is stupid today.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think it's just, it's a byproduct of the world we're in now. Like, everything is just hyper political. Everything is hyper polarized. Really,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I hate political conversations sometimes because we tend to argue against the most extreme form of the opposition, right?
Right.
So it's like, either you hate women and want to oppress them, or
Hmm.
you want to wait till a baby's born and like slash their throat. Like, there's no in between.
No, yeah,
And it's
none.
like, that is crazy. Like, there's so much nuance missing from every conversation. And I think because of that, because we don't get to have regular conversations with each other,
Yeah.
those of us who do make art try to speak through it. And sometimes that's just going to be, you know what, let me get it through your thick skull since you're reading a comic book. Did
Yeah.
you know that America has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners? What are we going to do about that today? And
Right.
I'm like, why did this come out of Lois Lane's mouth? Like, what? And that's the thing. So it's like, again, because I'm reading comics to escape, not because I want to be dumb or willfully ignorant.
Yeah.
But if a book, kind of takes me out of the book and into the real world. That's like the exact opposite of what I was trying to do.
Exactly.
You
And
know,
and
so
and that's the case for quite a few, I mean, for I would say probably majority of comic book readers.
mhm.
I myself, like I got one foot in, one foot out. I read comics to experience.
Right.
And sometimes it's to connect more to the world that I'm already living in, and sometimes it's to go off to a land far, far away. For me, it really depends. But I
Mhm.
think there is something to be appreciated and respected from everybody really that has to live in this world. We have to deal with the world in front of us, be it
Right.
good, bad, or in between. If we could do all of ourselves a favor and disconnect a little bit more, pick up a paper comic and put down that phone and turn on do not disturb and cut off those notifications and give our minds and our consciousnesses, or conscious I don't how do you say multiple consciousness, the collective consciousness.
The collective.
uh
That's a great way to say it. Yeah.
yeah,
Just
but
make it singular.
just make it singular. Oh, we can really talk about the singularity. That's Hickman stuff. But
Right.
to give us that breakaway. And like you said, reality is online and on the internet. It's the most extreme versions of the two sides or three sides, mostly only two side. But in reality, when we go outside and our neighbors are some of those people that we think we may be arguing against, it's
Mhm.
not always so extreme. And more often than not, there is a lot of care and concern that we have for those people. That's the thing that I like to see the most in comics, and that's what I like to put out in the world. Really, I may be quite critical of comics as an art form, but I love it. I've gone on record in saying whether you like a creator or you don't, just based off the fact that they aren't creating in comics, you can tell they like it because they love it because there's not a lot of money out here. And
Right.
if we can find a way instead to segregate and separate ourselves, but if we can find a way to bring ourselves together through this hobby and through these books, and if we can all just, you know, agree that Batman is just a ridiculous, rad character, and
Right.
if we can all agree that, man, when the art hits on a book, it's a vibe that you can't get anywhere else. Those things bring us together, and that's what I want to see more in the world than anything else.
Word. Word. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Then I probably misspoke, but yeah, I like to escape, but I don't need to not be reminded of the world. I just
Sure.
need.
I mean,
I
you
just
read
need.
Milestones, so obviously
Right. Right.
there goes your proof of that right there.
Right. But I do need to be firmly in the world of the comic book.
Yes,
Right. And if the
yes.
book is a reflection of the world that we're in, cool. But
Mhm.
if all of a sudden it feels like you're using, like, co-opting the book to do something else, it's okay,
Right.
that's weird. Um, or just stating the points in a way that feels unnatural, right? Like Lois Lane is not out of character if she's like yelling at someone, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Whatever's on her mind, she's gonna say it, right?
Right.
But if Lois Lane all of a sudden sounds like she's giving a book report, right? Okay, well that's different. So
Yes.
character voices matter.
Yeah.
The way you structure your dialogue matters. The way conversations flow
Yeah.
on a page matters a lot to me.
Absolutely.
Like nobody's about to speak in 15 sentences without breaking unless it's a podcast. Like those are the things that get me out of a book. But all in all, I think most comics, most literature, most art has some redeeming quality,
Hmm.
right? It's not
I
so
would
much
agree.
about what's bad about your book. It's typically what is so good about your book that it outweighed the bad for whoever the end user was.
Hmm.
So that's typically that's how I arrive at my, okay, well, the kick scale is just how did this book make me feel?
Hmm.
At the end of the day, the writing could be awesome and the art could be terrible. The art could be awesome, the writing could be terrible.
Hmm.
If either are terrible, I'm probably not recommending the book or reading it again. But if
Right.
one's serviceable and the other is great, then hey, that
That's a win.
works. That's a
Yeah.
win. Um, but yeah, man. So I guess oh wait, I didn't ask you. What takes you out of it? What's a bad comic for you?
You did hit some key things. I'm big on verisimilitude as well. Like keep the continuity of the world that we're in consistent.
Mhm.
If you If you jerk too much to the right, and I get whiplash, yeah, that'll take me out of it. I am a stickler for character voices. I do not like when everybody sounds the same. I
Mm,
particularly don't like um I don't like super decompressed storytelling,
mm,
especially if you don't have good cliffhangers and you're like you're more focused on just making something run long instead of also like making progress within it.
yeah,
Um, yeah, bad art can do it, but I'm pretty forgiving on artistic styles and stuff like that.
right.
Um, but yes, like bad dialogue, uninspired dialogue, plots that are not interesting and super predictable. If your book is super predictable, it better be the height of everything that you're doing. You better be executing it on that top tier level, because if it's super predictable, I get bored real fast.
Right.
Like, because it's not that you have to be the most unpredictable book ever in the world, and I do read some like that, but keep me guessing a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would say those are really a lot of the key things. And if you have inspired dialogue and even like Tarantino, some tasty dialogue, if you're a dialogue connoisseur, that can go pretty far. But man, dynamic storytelling, if you do have some action, and even if it's not like combat type of action, but if you have
Hmm.
actions that are occurring to people, I mean, someone can trip over someone sticking their foot out, and Jim Lee can turn that into, this crazy, and he's not even one of my favorite writers, but he's one of the, I mean, artists, but he's one of the best.
Right.
So if you can really have also inspired visuals that you're just really pouring into, if you can turn a panel into a mise en scene,
Hmm.
that can be pretty satisfying as well. I would say those are things that I look at for bad comics, and a few things that if it's the antithesis, are a really good comic to me.
Right. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think we're in agreement that generally what will ruin a comic for us is the scripting.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah, because I guess I can forgive, subpar art.
Hmm.
But if the words that I'm reading just don't make sense, they don't ring true to the character, they don't ring true to like just normal everyday conversation. Like if I'm reading this and it just sounds like, okay, you must just like live in message boards and like don't talk to people.
Right.
Like, that's what's gonna take me out. So I guess I'll end it like this. I wouldn't ask you for your top three, but I'll ask you for
Hmm.
three of your favorite comics, just so we have a feel for what you love.
Okay, got you. And are these series or like individual
I guess just
issues?
just stories. That's probably the
Hmm.
best way to do it. Stories, and then maybe
Okay.
individual issues if there's something that just stick out to you.
Okay, yeah, I got you. So my favorite comic story of all time is actually Cape's book. It's the death of Captain Marvel, and that's Marvel. It's
Mm,
hard for me to read that story without getting a tear in my eye. If you want to talk about like family and this and that, and like so much of it is there, and you don't need a deep knowledge of Marvel to really know. If you just kind of know a little bit of Thanos and a little bit about Marvel, you can read it. Jim Starlin is incredible. Still my favorite comic writer
mm,
overall to this day. Number two is issue number 4 of The Watchmen.
okay.
It's just expertly executed, incredibly told. Of course, it's Alan Moore, the best comic book writer of all time, and he's not even my favorite. And if we're gonna throw another one out, yeah, I'll just say my favorite series of all time, East to West. uh, Jonathan Hickman, Nick Dragata. I actually have a issue number 9 here because it's when the Black Prince
Mm.
spins off into his own story. I forgot to mail it to you a long time ago, so I'll make sure I get that to you. But
Okay.
yes, cyberpunk world meets western with some biblical properties in there,
Mm,
all really centered around family and love. But the characters that you get are very much like a Tarantino movie. They're very distinct. They got their voices. They're up to no good, and they all get their comeuppance. What
word.
you got, Kicks?
Word. So yeah, I mean, we'll keep it capes for a second. So House of X, Powers of 10,
Let's
right?
go. Hit
Like
me.
That's the story that got me into comics. That's the story
Yeah.
that I compare every story to
Yeah.
in my head as I'm reading it month to month. So, House of X Powers of 10. If you haven't read it, it just kind of, it redefines the X-Men in a way that was awesome for the time. I think Marvel has kind of taken the concept and just run it into the ground at this point. But just those 12 issues, House of X Powers of 10, read that and it's amazing. It's amazing.
Amazing.
Um, Another story I'll shout out is Batman R.I.P. by Grant Morrison, right? R.I.P. Grant Morrison's run on the mainline Batman title from the introduction to Damian Wayne to R.I.P., right? All the way up until Final Crisis, basically. It's just awesome, right? You're and it's probably better for you if you know the meta, if you know some Batman history, because part of what's so great about it is he's taking Batman lore from like every age of comics and the TV shows and like anywhere else you might have consumed Batman, and he's making it part of his run and part of his story in a way that completely makes sense to the story. And you're like, oh snap, that's Batmite. Oh, Batmite is a compelling character in a story. What? Right? Like, so it's great for that reason, for the meta, but also if you wanted to read a story that like just tells you why Batman is Batman or like what makes him so amazing and like why he could beat anyone, RIP will do it. People talk about how Grant Morrison kind of made Batman into like a god and like made him OP. I mean, it's true, but
Yeah.
it was done well. And RIP is just my favorite example of that. Like, anyway, I can't say more without spoiling it. Another one of my favorites though, and we talked about it earlier, is Four Kids Walk Into a Bank. Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, Matthew Rosenberg, Tyler Boss, and it's a story about a bank robbery planned by four kids. The reason for the robbery is compelling. It's only 4 issues. It's a really quick read, but you quickly fall in love with the characters. It's like The Sandlot meets Set It Off in some ways. Like that's a weird combination, but
it's true.
It's right. It's there. But man, I love that book had so much heart, and it's funny. It's funny. It's tragic. It's heartfelt, and it is just some of the best stuff I've felt after reading a comic.
Definitely.
Single issues don't stand out to me as much, and maybe just because I've been reading stuff from 2019 on,
Yeah.
but
that decompression era was already set in.
I don't generally remember comics issue to issue, like, but or at least not over time. The series that I'll tell you that I've been enjoying the most recently, let's see, I can't even do that, but I'll give another honorable mention. The beginning of the IDW Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles run, also some of my favorite comics. It's like to be able to sort of reinvent a property, right? Like in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have always been edgy and campy, right? They start out as a parody, and by the time they get to what most people know about them, it's a full-on camp. Turtles in multicolor outfits, eating pizza, blah blah blah.
Cowabunga.
Right. Catchphrases, all of it. The IDW Turtles run, written mostly by Tom Waltz, but with Kevin Eastman as well. It's just it kind of in the same way that like Grant Morrison makes Batmite work, right? Like it takes those things that were kind of trivial and gives them purpose. It's like it's a grown-up Ninja Turtles, basically. Like it's got everything that reminds you of what it was when you were a kid or whenever you fell in love with Turtles, but it's sophisticated storytelling, so you don't feel like you're reading like a kiddie book. So I'll shout that out as well, and that's where
Nice.
I'll leave it.
Okay. That's a solid little group right there. I like it.
Or appreciate it. Well, look, man. So I said this was going to be a shorter episode. I lied, but now you know what we're looking at and looking for when we're looking for good comics, so that when we're recommending a story, if we decide to cover a story on this show, we think it's good for all those reasons. And hopefully you'll think it's good as well. Maybe even dope. So again, you can find me on YouTube at Comics Are Dope. And if you want more, timely comic book news, advice, recommendations, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. Go to thisweekincomics.com. Every Friday, I will email you 3 recommendations from this week's comics, as well as pre-order recommendations for books that are coming up on their final order cutoff deadline. I feel like cutoff and deadline are 2 of the same word, but hey, go to thisweekincomics.com to stay in the know. And Skip, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Skipintosh, Skipntosh. You can also find me on Twitch, so twitch.tv/Skipintosh. And right now we're covering Jonathan Hickman's whole Marvel run from beginning to end. So come check us out. Main place you can find me, though, is in that BJ Kicks Discord server.
Word. I still need to rename it, right? So it's formerly known as the K Squad. I think we're just calling it the Comics Are Dope community, but the link is in the show notes. Just go to bjkicks.link/Discord. No matter what it's named, you'll find us there. And we can't wait to have you in the community. We talk comics, we do reviews, we have book clubs, show off recent pickups. It's a whole lot. It's a lot. If you ever wanted to be friends with somebody that loves comics and talk about anything in the world, you can do it. We can get your diet right. We can get your exercise right. We do it all. So we'll see you there.
Us.
Right. And until next time, make sure you're reading something dope. Peace.
Peace.